Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick comparison between the Ikelite and Meikon underwater enclosures designed specifically for the Sony RX100 Mark IV. Now you may have noticed the Mark IV is sitting right here in the middle of the shot. I'm going to go ahead and pick that up. Remember, the RX100 Mark IV is arguably the best pocketable camera ever made, in my opinion, just building off of every generation that Sony has made with this 1-inch sensor, now with 4K video, granted only 5 minutes of that, and it will overheat, built-in OLED viewfinder, Wi-Fi, NFC, and again, just one of the best pairings of, I would say, sensor to glass performance that you're going to be able to fit in your pocket, and a fully articulating screen that can come all the way around for self shots. Of course, that's not going to happen here in the underwater world, but let's talk about what we are here to speak about, which is the Ikelite versus the Meikon. Now, the Ikelite, you're looking at $550 US retail for this beast, and I say that because if you haven't already noticed, considerably larger, also considerably heavier than the Meikon underwater enclosure to its right. Very different approach from each manufacturer on basically protecting your camera. There's also a difference in depth rating. The Ikelite has a 200-foot depth rating, the Meikon 130. So if you need 200 feet, you know the Ikelite is the one to go with. If 130 more than covers you, which in my case it does, then it's still obviously a relevant comparison. In terms of build quality, there's no question far and away the Ikelite has the Meikon beat. I say that because not just because of its heft and weight, but every element of the Ikelite, which I'm going to take you through right now, is just more robust. That's my best way of putting it. The entire build quality, the buttons are metal as opposed to plastic on the Meikon. The knobs and dials, all pretty much aluminum, whereas on the Meikon we're dealing predominantly with plastic. We even have framing for the screen. In terms of opening it, you're looking at metal latches, something you will not have on the Meikon. It's a plastic door. Basically, to open it up, you just have to try to do them simultaneously. Just press those buttons in, and then the latches. Whoa! I just gave the camera a good shot there, which is why I was trying to get it out of frame. That'll be great for playback. But let's pop it open. Make sure the RX100 survived that. I do have a screen protector on this, by the way. I don't think it should be dead at this point. Yeah, survived. Looking at the body to see if we got any damage. Looks okay to me. Did I mention the RX100 Mark IV is built like a tank? At least for a pocket camera. So, with that out of the way, we've removed the back. And as you can see, the entire assembly here on the back side. And again, I do like that Ikelite frames the LCD. Just more protection, even though I nearly destroyed the camera just now with this. And the buttons here I have noticed can get a little bit sticky. Very good labeling, much clearer than the Meikon, for those of you wondering. Even making the movie button red. If these get stiff, Ikelite does provide very specific instructions, as they always have, on how to fix that, whether it's greasing them or, fresh water and essentially pressing the buttons till they no longer have the stiffness issue. I have noticed the stiffness issue, but again, this is just part of what you get with the Ikelite brand. And also, I really like that they've built in the strap, something Meikon does not do. They do include a strap, but the strap is not something I would rely on if you're dealing with a $1,000 camera like the RX100 Mark IV. It's $950, whatever it may be, or if you got it on sale. O-ring right here around the back door. And if we take a look on the interior of this, let me put this down, you can see we actually have a mount plate for the RX100, which I like a lot. This is another thing you will not get with the Meikon, and it again speaks to the quality difference, why this is a more expensive enclosure. Again, more robust, more protection for the camera, even though I nearly destroyed it with the enclosure itself. You're basically just going to screw this on right here to the mount on your camera, tripod mount, and the camera's going to go right in. Let me just do this off camera. It'll be a little bit easier for me. And, they recommend using a flathead screwdriver, but you can, like I'm doing right now, just use your finger. At least I'm doing this in a quick fashion, as you may have already picked up on, just to get this on quickly so that you can see exactly what it looks like. And in my experience so far, it really comes down to what you're actually looking to get out of the respective camera. The Meikon, definitely a better value, but if what you're after is performance for longevity purposes, I think the Ikelite, just its build quality alone, having some issues here with this, even though I said I was going to do a quick mount, really do make a very big difference, because I can already tell with the Meikon that it's not going to be able to take the beating that the Ikelite potentially could, and that is something that many of you may feel is worth the extra money. So there you can see the piece is mounted. I didn't do an incredible job, but it is mounted. And then all you're going to do is slide it right in to the groove designed for that base plate. Just like this. And now the camera is inside the enclosure and ready to be used. Of course, you have to close the back plate using these latches. And you can see it's a little off center there. That's my fault with the mounting job. All of the knobs and dials pretty much depend on you. And this is one area where some people will be split. In my opinion, the Ikelite, for all of its protection, far more robust, I would say, engineering than the Meikon. It gives up some in the way of functionality, ergonomics, and ease of use. Does not mean that it's inferior. It's just a matter of what you're looking to get out of your enclosure. If you need more depth and protection, and again, longevity, the Ikelite seems to be the winner. But for a casual shooter, I wouldn't really recommend the Ikelite, simply because it, again, is more convoluted in some instances. So right here, the mode dial, you can see it requires making contact with the actual dial. And that's something you're not going to have to worry about with the Meikon. I'm going to show you that in a moment when it's in there. The Meikon has direct contact. Now, in some ways, this may be better. It really depends on the shooter. Power button right here. The flash does not need to be ejected on this. On the Meikon, it does, something that's noteworthy. We have, as well, beyond that, control of the actual ring right here. You can see that happening, which is another element that is unique to the Ikelite, something you cannot do with the Meikon, which is nice if you plan on using the ring on board on the camera. Sorry if you're not seeing that, to actually control anything. That's another nicety. The zoom right here basically is a hook, if you can see clearly. I'm trying to give you an angle that latches onto the zoom lever of the camera. And this was another area where personally I preferred the Meikon, but this works perfectly well. Nothing wrong with it. Your shutter button, another area that I preferred with the Ikelite, and with the Meikon. I'll explain why. While this is, again, really well designed, I could not find myself really able to get that tactile feel to do that half button, half shutter press to get focus. Whereas with the Meikon, having a traditional button, I was able to feel the difference between a half and full press. Here, anytime I would pull this, I was pretty much shooting, and I had to have nailed my subject because I really couldn't do a half press with this shutter button. And beyond that, well, there really isn't much else to tell. I mean, the Ikelite is, again, built like a tank. You can see the diffuser there on the front end. Really just well-made, made in America. For those of you that is relevant to, the Ikelite branding there on the left side. And as far as its price point, I really do not think you can do better. Anything beyond the Ikelite at $550, you're going to be jumping up to $600, $700, maybe even $1,000. And once you're in that price range, you have to wonder if, diminishing returns. I mean, this is a $950 camera, and you're going to spend basically the price of the camera, if not more, on an enclosure. Then you better be using this on a regular basis for professional work. And just to show you what this looks like closed up in the housing, just pop it on and get the latches in place. The other thing for me really was practicality. Even though this has a wrist strap, to me the Meikon is already big enough when you're underwater, and it was more of a question, do I really want even more weight? Some of you will not care because you'll be using a mounted grip on this, so that's less of an issue. But there it is inside the enclosure. You can see what it looks like. Again, the flash does not need to be on. It'll power up and work without the flash because Ikelite is tailoring to a consumer that, again, is likely to be more on the pro side than a casual diver, no question about it. And the price reflects that. The build reflects that. And it's just a really nice enclosure. Just for me, it was a little bit, again, on the heavy side. And I wish this also was blacked out, but that's another thing where Ikelite is assuming you're going to get your lighting right. You're not depending on them to account for that, even though they do have a diffuser built in and they have another optional card to change that with the fiber optic right there up at the front. It's something where Ikelite definitely, again, is tailored towards the, I would say, pro-grade equipment quality, whereas the Meikon, which I'm about to drop the RX100 in, is for a more casual diver, snorkeler, or even just if you want protection outside. Otherwise, this is strictly for diving, no question about it, because of its additional weight. And for me, I felt like even though this strap is great that it's actually built onto the case, I felt like I still was going to need a handle, at least a single, if not a double, handlebar for this just because of its sheer size. I mean, we're taking a small pocket camera and blowing it up into a tank, basically. So it really depends what you need. I think the Ikelite is a great choice. You might want to look for it in a used market. I know a lot of vendors do have it for sale that way, so that's another good option if you don't want to swallow the $550 price point. But otherwise, really, I've covered what the Ikelite is capable of. I also want to stress you're not going to get different results from this, the Ikelite that is, or the Meikon. It really comes down to what you're doing. It's not going to depend on the enclosure itself. I've already mentioned durability definitely in the Ikelite's favor, and also protecting the camera, generally speaking, seems far better with the Ikelite than the Meikon, even though I did almost destroy this when I was opening the back plate at the beginning of the video, which is probably one of the more entertaining moments of, you know, screw-ups that I've had here. Not screw-up's not the right word, but near misses. Well, it wasn't a miss. I made pretty good contact. I'll see when I actually go back to take a look at this video. But again, there's the interior. No included red filter here. You're going to need to purchase that, you know, on its own. Again, a clear sign that Ikelite, you know, is expecting a different kind of consumer with the sale of their product, and I get it. This is really in a different league than the Meikon, and that's why it's priced at, you know, more than twice the expense of the Meikon, and built in a completely different manner, which is basically expecting the photographer to have everything they need to complete their diving experience with this. And pricing should not be the barrier. Now, again, remember the size of this. I mean, the whole point of the RX100 Mark IV is compact, incredible image quality. You're really not sacrificing anything, or at least that's the idea in theory. And in my opinion, it does a phenomenal job. This is, in most cases, a workhorse for me, even though those of you who follow my channel know I have a lot of different equipment. The RX100 Mark IV definitely is the camera I use most outside of the A7R Mark II. Let's go ahead and pop it into the Meikon. First, I want to show you, of course, the lens hood, just like on the Ikelite. The Ikelite, by the way, is not attached. So here we have a tether. On the Ikelite, we do not, but you could easily rectify that with a different hood. Even the hood here, the quality is inferior, but that's to be expected. You're talking about $250 base just for the enclosure you're looking at. If you buy the one I did with the handlebar, you're bumping up to $260, $270. It does come with the red filter. That's something I highly recommend if you're doing anything, I would say 20, 30 feet, 40 feet, 60, especially if you're going to test the 130 feet. You want to have that red filter. It's a necessity. Blacked out on the front. This is a key difference between the Meikon of days past. For example, the RX100 original enclosure they made all the way through the 3rd gen. The 4th is now blacked out, so the flash is only going to come out of where it should, right here. This is removable, for those of you that are wondering. Again, the same fiber optic threads that are on the Ikelite. And you do have an accessory mount, if I can pop this back into place, right there. It's not cooperating. Accessory mount, a shoe right there, which is nice to have. There we go. Zoom lever right here. Shutter button here. This is what I was mentioning before that I feel is a little more tactile. I was able to actually do a half press, get things in focus before firing. No framing on the back to protect the RX100 Mark IV screen like on the Ikelite. The button layout pretty much the same in terms of what you have on the back side, just to give you the side-by-side so you can see that, but plastic instead of metal. The separation not nearly as good as the Ikelite, also something in Ikelite's favor, and labeling here is not anywhere near as good. Definitely very crowded, but if you know how to use your camera already, you're not going to have any problems using this. Dedicated movie button, your mode dial right here, I just feel is more tactile than the one designed for the Ikelite. Again, plastic as opposed to aluminum with the Ikelite, but you do get what you pay for. There's a reason this is predominantly plastic in build. It's literally just about half the price of the Ikelite. Your power button, this is supposed to control the switch for the flash. I'll tell you in advance, the flash does need to be ejected in order for this to work, which I thought I was going crazy. I thought there was something wrong with my camera, but it was literally just because the flash was not employed. The camera basically would shut itself off. Not something that's going to happen in the Ikelite. The Ikelite obviously didn't trigger whatever the Meikon did. Other things to point out, the base plate here, you can mount a handle to, an arm, for lighting or for grip. Definitely a lot more going on the Ikelite. Another key difference between the two, something I wanted to point out for those of you that are wondering. This is a metal base plate, but definitely a lot more, I would say, again, robust on the Ikelite, which is a recurring theme here. So let me go ahead and open this up. We don't have the system that ricocheted before on me. That was my own fault, of course. O-ring around the back plate, same idea as the Ikelite. But again, all plastic and not nearly as thick a grade of plastic. That's something else I want to point out. We do have a sensor in here for moisture in order to detect and let you know whether or not you're getting any leakage. Obviously, if you're down there, if you're 30, 40 feet, 100 feet, and this happens, you've got a problem. You've got to surface as quickly as possible. The Ikelite, oddly enough, does not have that. But then again, the Ikelite has a completely different level of build quality. Good engineering here, not the same as the Ikelite. Some will prefer this, some will prefer the Ikelite. For me personally, again, this was the right, I would say, overall combination of value and performance. This strap is not included with the Meikon. This is one of my old dive straps from a Sony Enclosure that I threw on here just because it's still in great shape, and I happen to prefer it even over the included Ikelite one, which, granted, is basically soldered onto the case, which is a benefit as opposed to just having a string. But unless you see significant wear here, you should be fine. Let me go ahead and pop the RX100 Mark IV in there. And one thing you'll immediately notice is that this does not have nearly the protection anywhere near it for the camera as does the Ikelite Enclosure. For example, we don't even have there's no base plate here. We don't have, I should have waited to pop out the flash and see if I'm really trying to destroy this camera through this course of this review here. Basically, there are just rubber seating nubs there for this to fall into. Then you have to eject the flash, pop it into position, and close this sucker up. And there you have it. With both of these, you do want to test the enclosures without the camera in water. Submerge them. Make sure you're not getting any water inside the enclosure first. You may also need a defogger in there depending on conditions, whether or not the dive boat you're on has a water bucket essentially to keep your gear at the same temperature as the ocean you're about to step into. Those things will play a role, but you really do want that red filter. Again, this is not an expensive high-end red filter. It is included for free pretty much with the purchase of the Meikon, but it was something that, again, I knew I needed, so why not if they're going to give it to me? And it works, and it does happen to work for those of you that are curious. So powering the camera on, fairly simple. You can see right there, the red filter is on. That's why we're getting a red image. I already mentioned the cluster of buttons here, all plastic, not metal like on the Ikelite, but still fully functioning. We can jump into the menu, change settings. That's not an issue. It's just more convoluted. These don't tend to stick as much because they're plastic and not metal, but I also don't expect them to live as long, or the whole enclosure to live as long and be as durable as the, again, much bigger, heavier Ikelite. Dedicated movie button here, not red, so it's not going to stand out like the one on the Ikelite. In terms of, again, the lever for the flash, I don't even know why it's there, because as soon as the flash is not employed, the camera will auto shut off. Power button you already saw in action. The zoom right here, you know, very tactile. And that's one of the reasons I happen to like this enclosure. Its form factor, compact, you know, staying true to the actual form factor of the RX100 Mark IV itself. The shutter button, I told you a half press is possible, and you can see me doing that there, and that's the difference for me. That was one of the key differences between shooting with the Meikon versus the Ikelite. You know, that shutter trigger that's on the side of the Ikelite right here really does not allow you to have that tactile feel. It's all or none, and for some that'll be a non-issue. They're probably just shooting video. Whatever it may be, it's just something, again, I will point out and reiterate. I do wish that the labeling of the buttons was better, maybe more contrast. Maybe had they actually made them black as well, it would have, you know, popped a little bit more, so that you weren't struggling to read it. I know it's something that all of you may have a problem seeing here. I'll try to bring it into focus as best I can, but you can see function, display, menu, the flash control, you know, delete down here, among many other things, exposure, comp, playback, burst mode, timer, all those things are there. So it's well laid out. It's just going to take some time, or learning curve, I would say, compared to the Ikelite. But the Ikelite has a bigger learning curve overall, that's for sure. If you already know how to use this camera, you'll be fine. This will work. Again, just make sure you test these enclosures before you jump into the water. It's very obvious. But from what I've seen, and I'll eventually end up putting up some, at least video samples at the very least, from possibly both, but definitely from the Meikon, because that's the one I predominantly used. There was really no difference in performance. It was really a matter of the build and the actual overall form factor, and whether or not you were willing to accept or be happy with what the Meikon has to offer. Let me power this down, as opposed to the Ikelite. Again, remember, the Ikelite, more expensive, and you can tell. I mean, as soon as you put this, you know, put them side by side, have one in your hand, you already know which is the more expensive product. The problem becomes which is the more practical product. If you're a pro, this is basically, I would say, your best option out there, because, again, spending more than the camera's value, to me, becomes a little ridiculous. If you're not a pro and you're just a certified diver like myself that isn't doing this for anything more than a hobby, you're not relying on your footage for sale purposes, you're not actually videoing other divers because you're a dive master, or, you know, working with a dive master to record people on their first dive, then obviously the Meikon seems to be the better overall fit, in my opinion. So casual divers, stick with Meikon, save yourself the money, and also realize that, you know, how long are you going to use the camera? I believe that this enclosure will survive, despite its inferior overall build quality to the Ikelite, long enough to serve me through the lifetime that I'm going to personally use the RX100 Mark IV before, you know, a better camera comes along that I'll want to make my primary, the RX100 Mark V likely, primary compact point and shoot that can do it all. You know, if you need an enclosure that's going to last 5 years or longer, you know, warranty, USA made and backed, you're looking at it here on the right. Customer support for the Meikon isn't going to be terrible, but you are going to be dealing directly with China. I was able to shockingly get this in a single day, overnighted, but that's because it was a holiday promotion for Christmas. So that's why, ironically, this was easier to get a hold of than the Made in America Ikelite. Go figure. But again, casual use, overall value and performance, all about the Meikon on the left. But if you need that extra durability, if you need that overall the depth range of 200 feet as opposed to 130, and just a better built enclosure where you know your camera is not going to be compromised, even though there is no sensor in here, then the Ikelite is far and away the better choice. For me personally, though, I've made it very clear through the course of this review that the Meikon is the one that I am personally sticking with, just because it makes more sense for me. Again, if I was making a living shooting underwater photography or video, I'd be looking at the Ikelite, or possibly one of the other brands that's even more expensive. I wish the Ikelite had a blackout front end, but again, you're looking at a segment of the market where Ikelite and other prosumer or professional enclosure manufacturers expect you to know what you need, and they aren't trying to be your all-in-one stop, whereas Meikon is trying to give you everything you need, and that's because they are definitely targeting a more casual consumer, which is where I find myself. So it's really a matter of what you plan on doing. Both are going to do a great job. That's one thing I can tell you, but there's no question that the Meikon does a lot more for a lot less. But durability, not in its favor. But ergonomics, overall form factor, Meikon takes the cake. Ikelite wins, though, in every other regard. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.